Welcome to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze, bringing you all the entertainment news and movie reviews a Jew can use. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with the one, the only, the movie maven, Jordan Hoffman.
We have to, I think, at some point add in sound effects of like the more you build up my introduction, it's a crowd roaring in anticipation or potentially booing and throwing things. I don't know, one or the other.
Yeah.
Or a mix. I like a mix, you know?
Okay, we'll work on that. Jordan Hoffman.
Hello. Hi, Amanda. How are you? How are things today in Jerusalem? It is 7 hours in the future where you are. So I'm still stuck in the past. As is evidenced by last week's movie was a nostalgia movie, and this week's movie is a nostalgia movie for me. We're doing 70s movies on a little stretch here in the summertime before we plunge into the fall, where we get all the new
future movies.
We get all the what are they called? The prestige films of the new year, which I'm sure will have a lot of relevant titles, but we're still doing some nostalgia titles here on the Reel Schmooze. So yeah, I'm excited to be here this week as always. Did you have a good weekend? Did anything exciting happen this weekend? I can't remember.
Who remembers the weekend? It's so late in the week. But in any case, Jordan Hoffman,
Yeah.
I feel like while I was watching the movie of this week, which is Wizards by Ralph Bakshi, I just really wished I knew your middle name, because then when I was shaking my fist at you and being so mad about this film, I would know what your middle name was instead of just Jordan Hoffman.
You could curse
Jordan
me entirely.
Xavier Hoffman.
It's not Xavier. My middle name is I have a very Jewish middle name. No, I'm joking. My middle name is Sean for some reason.
Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, my middle name is Sean, but it's not spelled S-E-A-N. It is spelled in a more Americanized way. Sean, most Jews are not typically named Sean, but my mother liked the name Sean. What can I say? So that is my middle name, which actually was a point of humor. My aunt would occasionally, in a way, I guess she was kind of mocking my mom, would and still to this day sometimes refers to me as Jordan Sean O'Reilly, because that would be the typical Sean name. But that is what my middle name is. But so yes, we watched Wizards, which, it's only 80 minutes. So you can't curse me for that long.
But it feels like 2 years. So,
Well, I will say that this movie is certainly not for everyone, but I'm glad we
or
did it
anyone,
because it's
maybe.
very...
Potentially.
Well, believe it or not, but it was surprisingly, including to the filmmakers and the producers' surprise, something of it was not a box office bomb. It did okay, and it has since become a significant cult classic. And, something about Wizards specifically and Ralph Bakshi in general, who's not a household name, but there's a famous quote. I believe that the quote is attributed to Brian Eno, who talks about the first album by the band The Velvet Underground, which of course was led by Lou Reed, a well-known Jew from Long Island. He said that the first Velvet Underground album only sold 1,000 copies, but everyone who bought a copy later started their own band. So it was very influential. And Ralph Bakshi, the underground, independent, hard scrabble, tough guy, voice of the street animator, who is silly one moment and profane the next, and beautiful to look at sometimes, I feel, was somebody who never achieved massive mainstream success, but his influence is still being felt. He's a major fork in the road for animation, which we can get to when we talk more about his background and this film in particular.
All right, we are going to do all of that after the break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with movie maven Jordan Sean O'Reilly Hoffman.
Now you know.
Now I know. So, Jordan Hoffman, okay, listen.
Yeah.
I fully understand why this 1977 animated film is part of the Reel Schmooze canon. And I also fully understand that when I asked you if I should watch it with the kids, you said definitely not.
Yeah, it's not a kid's movie for sure.
Not a kid's movie.
It's not Shrek.
It's not Shrek.
Yeah.
It is basically very perverted, I would say, very depressing. And very much too long for what it is, because the premise of it is so bizarre, like the entire film itself. But in my mind, Jordan,
Hmm.
this would have been so much better if it were like a 20-minute short, but it just spun on
I,
and
it,
on
I
and
mean,
on and on.
it is episodic. I mean, the next movie that Bakshi did was an adaptation of Lord of the Rings, and you can
Right.
sort of understand that because these are both movies about um, spunky underdogs traveling weird terrain to go fight a villain and save the land. And that is also episodic. It goes on and on and on, and there's little scenes, and some are more interesting than others. But yeah, I mean, let's put it this way: a little bit goes a long way. And if you're not into what you're seeing in Wizards after 15 minutes, you'll be like, I got it. I can move on with my life. But you got to understand market forces demand a feature film to sell tickets, and it's got to be at least 80 minutes or so. And that was what they made.
But I
And
actually did watch the Lord of the Rings adaptation that Bakshi had made. I watched it as a little girl. It
oh
scared the
wow,
bejesus out of me. I remember
wow,
it clearly.
oh cool.
Also because I watched it when I was babysitting for kids. It was late at night and I was really scared.
Mm,
But that adaptation had the beauty that you're talking about,
yeah,
whereas Wizards
a little
was
darker.
really,
Yeah.
it was darker, but it was also like boobies everywhere, and
Yeah,
you're
well,
just like,
okay. So let me backtrack and explain to the listeners who this fellow Ralph Bakshi is. Who I do think, like I said, his work is not household name stuff, but he was a mentor for a lot of animators who are still working today and whatnot. So the guy was born in Israel in 1938, 39, 40, something like that. Um, Maybe I don't know how old he is now. He's in his late 80s now, so I can't do the math. But he was born in Israel, in Haifa, but then moved with his family. Well, he's born before the state of Israel. He was born in pre state Israel, but then moved to the USA as a very very young child. Grew up in Brooklyn, very very poor, absolute dirt poor in a mishmash of ethnic communities there, and then for a little while lived in a neighborhood in Washington D.C. that was predominantly black, and a very important thing what happened to him as a child was he was the only white kid in a black school in D.C. and a Jewish white kid. So he was kicked out. He was because they didn't want to integrate. So it's kind of like the reverse of like Little Rock, of like letting the black kids into the white school. This was sort of and he was kicked out, and then they went back to Brooklyn, and he was raised in the milieu of poverty and a lot of different ethnic voices and a lot of intermix of black and white, similar to George Carlin, who was Irish American but also lived in a black neighborhood, which I find interesting because the main character in Wizards, the voice, it sounds to me like George Carlin doing one of his voices. He's like, yeah, I'm talking like this, but it's kind of a Jewish coded character, but he sounds like George Carlin doing it.
but you
Um,
know who is one of the voices?
Young Mark Hamill is in there.
Exactly,
Yeah, he
Luke
gets Luke
Skywalker.
Skywalker. He's in it for 2 seconds, but
Yeah.
yeah, well, there's actually an interesting story about George Lucas and Ralph Bakshi I'll get to. So anyhow, he later became an animator, and he was part of his the work that he was doing on TV. He did some of the early Spider-Man cartoons, but his first feature film was an adaptation of Fritz the Cat, which was a character created by R. Crumb, who's another sort of like underground,
Perverted
yeah,
animator.
weirdo, underground. This is sort of like counterculture 1960s. What Jimi Hendrix did to the guitar, these guys did to comic books. Just totally revolutionized the form. And Fritz the Cat was marketed as the first X-rated cartoon, and there is a lot of sex in it, but it's not meant for pornography. It's not to get people titillated. It was just like, hey, we're doing drugs, we're doing sex. It was just like meant to be shocking. So he did this Fritz the Cat, which was something of a success. His follow-up film was something called Heavy Traffic, which I actually think is better than Fritz the Cat because it's very innovative in its use of, he would go and just take audio. He would go out into the street. He would go to bars. He would meet people and just record audio, sometimes surreptitiously, and then use that to animate to, and just to get these scenes of nightlife and street life and whatnot. And then he made some other independent films. He did something which was a little controversial called Coonskin, which was a take on Song of the South, which was still to this day, people don't know if it is an incredibly racist film or if it is actually a righteous film that is mocking racist tropes. I think at the time he felt that he was on the side of, he was doing, like you can watch old episodes of All in the Family and say, oh my God, they said that on TV? That's so racist. Well, it was done to a point. And George Carlin's humor is similar in the same way. And in Richard Pryor's also. He was making these independent films, and he ended up making, the next one he wanted to do was something called Wizards, which in his mind, although it is a little bit hard to connect the dots sometimes, in every interview he's ever given, he said, yes, Wizard is about the foundation of the state of Israel. And you go, it is? I guess. I mean, there are some very clear moments where the villains in this film are Nazis. I mean, they even call the bad guy the Fuhrer, and at one point they call him Hitler at one point. It's just like, because a little bit of stream of consciousness logic to the film, you could say. So there is that, and it is about like these kind of these elves who are like looking for a home and like traveling. So I think that is in his head. This was his story. But
I think this is one of those points where you're like, I'll have what he's having,
right.
Because it's just what I mean. Okay, Jordan Hoffman.
Yeah.
Part of his charm, I guess, is the mix of media in his animation as well.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, and so that definitely brought it into our canon because there's this one movie projector that survived 5,000 years of radiation. And
it's set after World War III. There's a nuclear tragedy of some kind, and like there's very few humans left, and there are these mutants who emerge from the muck, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, and that's the planet we're on now. It's like some other realm. It may as well be Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings, and there are these two wizard brothers. One is named Black Wolf, and he's very evil. He's so evil, he's not even kind to his mother. That's what it says. It's a very Jewish moment. It's like, the narrator's like, and he even refused to speak to his own mother. It's like, oh, it's terrible. And then there's the nice wizard whose name is Avatar. And for a while, you don't hear him speak, and you think he's going to be very angelic and like maybe speak like Ralph Fiennes and have a British accent. But then when he talks, he's like a junkyard Jew. He's like, hey, how you doing? I don't know. What do you want from me? We gotta solve the problems. We gotta save the fairies. He talks like this. So it's very funny. There's a lot of shtick in there. But yes, the mixed medium is something else that he's very well known for. The use of a process called rotoscoping, which he did not invent, but he popularized in a lot of his films, which is taking actual film footage, putting it through some cockamamie contraption to make it blend into the background, and it looks very eerie when you put color saturation over it. And like you said, that one of the plot of the film is the bad brother, Black Wolf, discovers a projector from thousands of years ago, and and in it is like a copy of Triumph of the Will. There's like all this Nazi footage, and he uses the Nazi footage to mesmerize his hordes of orc monsters to go and stamp out the last vestiges of righteousness on the planet so that he can rule the world. And he creates kind of like weirdo underground Nazis who wear these eerie gas masks, and one of them is all red and has a laser beam. And they even use some of the sound effects from Star Trek, which I think is great. And that's kind of it. And then it leads to a big battle. But along the way, our main wizard, who kind of talks like George Carlin and smokes a cigar and uses his foot to like take the cigar out of his mouth because he's a weird little dude. There's a lot of like, like kind of Tom and Jerry-esque exploits where they bounce around, and there's like, oh, you dirty, there's a lot of like Three Stooges humor in the middle of all this sword and sorcery and science fiction stuff. So it's a real blend. I mean, and then there's the daughter, the princess, who's just like half naked. She's a fairy, and she's just busting out of her top, and she looks like a Playboy cheesecake model.
All the female characters are basically, nipple shots and stuff like that. And you're just like, what the hell is going on?
This is the selling point. So it's a mishmash of violence, sex, bad guy Nazis, wacky wizards, Three Stooges humor, all in a and then they meet some rabbis also along the way. There's like a scene where they go to a temple. They call them priests, but they certainly act like rabbis to me. And they look, one of them looks like Jackie Mason. And there's a whole shtick of the rabbi scene. And then you also meet some of the stormtroopers, and they're kind of funny. They're like Dumb and Dumber. They're like, oh, what should we do? Well, I don't know. We should murder these people. Maybe we shouldn't. The movie was made for people that were stoned out of their minds. That was the thing. This was 1970s burnout culture, you know, rock and roll audiences. You couldn't get a ticket to see Led Zeppelin when they came into town. All right, we'll go see this movie Wizards at the Underground Theater instead. There's a midnight screening. We're going to get blazed in the car before we go in. And that was the culture. That was the underground culture of the time, 1977. I was too young to experience this firsthand, but so I have read.
We were too young, but also I'm like 30 years too old to appreciate it even, you know? Like,
yes. Well, that's the thing. Now I look at it with a sense of nostalgia. I mean, in the USA right now, marijuana use has been decriminalized, as we talked about on one of the episodes not long ago, because you visited. And not only the big tough cities like Chicago, you were in nice Bloomington, Indiana, which is a pleasant little college town. Every urban landscape in America right now stinks of weed all the time, which, you know, I have mixed feelings about. But it has, to me, to someone who has a fondness for this sort of cult, like Cheech and Chong movies of the 70s and 80s, I feel it's kind of neutered that underground culture because it's so mainstream now. It's like, oh, now it's not... You know, there's nothing daring about, you know, coding a film to be for pot smokers and that sort of like stream of consciousness weirdo experience. It's like so mainstream, like pop stars, generic pop stars, you know, have this stuff in their rock videos that it's just like, yeah, it's just not cool anymore. I just don't it's just like there's nothing to it. It's so I don't know.
We were really cool in high school and university.
Yeah, reading comic books and talking about Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and all that. So Wizards. I mean, yeah, it is a film that you know, it was not a substantial hit, but it came out like a little bit before Star Wars, so part of that, you know, era. And in fact, there's a funny story. So Ralph Bakshi and George Lucas, who were making Star Wars, they were both working for 20th Century Fox at the time, and there was a bit of a regime change, and they were both short on money to finish the film. Bakshi needed something like $50,000, which was nothing. But Lucas needed like $5 million. And they went into a meeting with the head of the studio at the same time. And the head of the studio said, I don't really like sci-fi, so neither of you are getting a dime out of me. So Bakshi kind of scratched his head, and that's when he kind of doubled down on the rotoscoping for the big battle sequences. He said, well, I'm going to have to use old footage from older films. And in fact, some of the films, if you're really a film scholar, you'll recognize images, but they're kind of like color washed and weird and psychedelicized, but they're images from the movie Alexander Nevsky, the Sergei Eisenstein film, and also El Cid, the old kind of sword and sandal picture. And what Lucas did, he said, okay, well, I'm short $5 million. I've made a few bucks. He recently made a film called American Graffiti, which was a big hit. He said, I have $5 million in my bank. I'm going to finance it myself. But as a result, 20th Century Fox, I own the rights to this film and all the merchandising rights. And 20th Century Fox said, merchandising rights? What are you talking about? It's like, yeah, I'm going to sell toys. I'm going to sell toys of Chewbacca. And they're like, fine, do what you want. Sell as many toys of Chewbacca as you want. How many do you think you're going to sell? Well, that's why George Lucas became George Lucas. Was that because and he was in the same meeting. So Ralph Bakshi, this weirdo Israeli-American weird underground nutcase, was witness to George Lucas's fortune being built. And of course, Lucas then financed every other film he made. I mean, he just, you know, made, so from a marketing and from a business point of view, it was a real great meeting for him. So anyhow, that's that. But when you were watching it, you had to at least been impressed by, even though it is strange and it's like, is this for kids? Because some of the silly stuff is for kids, like the Three Stooges-esque comedy scenes. And then it's like, is this meant to be for dirty old men in a raincoat? Because the fairy princess.
That one.
Well, that was the times. I mean, it was. I don't know. He was expressing what was inside of him, and that's what came out. I guess there are not too many. Yeah, had there also been like a woman character who was like the scientist, who maybe only dressed provocatively at certain times and also showed that she had a brain. But yeah, the fairy princess mostly, and she kind of talks like, it's set. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So one of the people I mentioned earlier that Bakshi has had like a lot of influence. One of the people who worked under Bakshi at some point was a fellow by the name of Bruce Timm, who later worked on a lot of the DC animated stuff, and he co-created the character of Harley Quinn. So I'm watching Wizards again. I'm like, oh, like of course, this movie, this Princess Eleanor, I think is her name. She's a direct antecedent to Harley Quinn. Now, Harley Quinn is also like, Mae West and Judy Holliday and all that. But, it's sort of in the DNA. It's all part of. It's all in the stew. It's all in there. Someone else that worked under Bakshi was a fellow by the name of John Kay, who created the Ren and Stimpy cartoons.
Oh, see, Ren and Stimpy I would watch in high school when I was cutting class, which I never ever did, but it happened.
Right. But can't you see a little connection between Bakshi and Ren and Stimpy? Like there's a similar world point of view, like just sort of a slacker, raging id, just like chaos, and then the animation style itself. There definitely is a connection there. Someone else who
a possibility that I was in, shall we say, wink, wink, the right state of mind when I watched Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah, Ren and Stimpy's hilarious. That's great stuff. Yeah. And then somebody else, I knew this and forgot until this morning when I was looking. Thomas Kincaid, the painter of light, the schmaltzy painter who was in all those shopping malls in the 1990s and early 2000s. He was a young acolyte of Ralph Bakshi. And Thomas Kincaid is you probably never heard of Thomas Kincaid. I think you were already living in Israel when he became very popular. I don't mean this as a negative, but he's like the king of the goys. He's like, he is the painter who, when somebody who doesn't know what to put on the wall says we should buy a painting, they buy a Thomas Kincaid painting. And they're mostly paintings of just like little villages, and has a little bit of a Lord of the Rings-esque quality to them. And he became a multi-zillionaire by franchising his galleries all over shopping malls. It's a very interesting story, Thomas Kincaid. And then after he died, it was discovered. There's a documentary about him. It's fascinating. After he died, and he wasn't like part of the Christian right, but he sold to that audience. So his persona was very like family man and righteous and moral. And then it was discovered after he died that when he had time off, he would go into his basement and paint these dark paintings of demons and all kinds of stuff. He like got all his aggression out, and he would secretly drink and whatnot. But it is a fascinating man, Thomas Kincaid. So he was from the Bakshi school also. But the rotoscoping stuff was neat, right? From a visual point of view, you were impressed by that, I would imagine, right?
Listen.
Yeah.
Jordan Hoffman.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
This movie, I mean, okay, let's go to a break and I'll tell you. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with Jordan Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
Movie, I don't know if you still get to keep the title.
You hated Wizards. Is this the worst one we've watched yet?
Yes.
Really? And it's only 80 minutes. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yes. But it was, I would say, 80 minutes that felt like 2 years, as I mentioned earlier.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I hated it. I would say I just hated it. And because I am such a, diehard, true to the Reel Schmooze person, I watched all of it, but I really was suffering. And then I thought, okay, we just need a new category. And the category is, haven't the Jews suffered enough? Okay?
Wow.
So
okay.
I put it in this category also because, all right, now we're going to trade on Jewish suffering to make this booby war magic film. We're putting Nazi footage into this. Our people were slaughtered by these Nazis, and he's manipulating it and using it in this stoner film. What the hell?
Sure.
So I found it
You were offended.
profane.
You found it a
I
little
was
bit offended.
offended.
Okay. Yeah.
So every single thing about it was offensive. I mean, as a woman, I was offended.
Yeah.
I was offended as a Jew. I was offended by you, Jordan Hoffman, who I just imagined you sitting and being like, yeah, we're going to watch Wizards, and then rubbing your hands like, ha, 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 ha. She's really going to hate that.
I was like the wizard Black Wolf in my tower. Well, okay. I mean, listen, it's totally fair to dislike it. That's absolutely fine. I mean, I do think it's a valid. I mean, like I said, he's not a household name like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas, but his influence was big in the time period, and those. The people who watched this movie later went on to. I mean, a lot of important filmmakers cite Bakshi as somebody they really liked. I mean, I was looking around at quotes this morning, like Quentin Tarantino, who's not Jewish, although he lives in Israel, is a big fan of all of Ralph Bakshi's film.
Father of Jews. Yes.
That's right. That's right. I saw him once on one talk show he said, I'm learning Hebrew. And he spoke a little Hebrew in front of Jimmy Kimmel or something like that. I did see that. So, yeah, but you're right.
I get it. I understand why it's in our corpus.
Sure. Yeah, but you just did not like
Jordan Hoffman.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I do recognize that it is Shaggy Dog, and even though it is only 80 minutes, there are parts it's like, all right, get to the big battle already because we got it. Some of the lampoony stuff does go on a little long. Some of the slapstick humor. I find the animation, which is a mix of, I mean, the prologue is all still images, still drawn images, which I thought was rather great. I thought it was like looking at a great comic book. There were all these images. For those who are listening and not watching, Amanda rolled her eyes and gave me a so what? I don't know. Somebody had to draw those castles and moats and dragons and stuff. I think it looks cool. You could stare at them. They're not moving. And then color gets added. I think the rotoscoping effect is eerie, not just because there are shots of Nazi planes and shots of Hitler screaming at Nuremberg and stuff. Not just that. It's just, in general, I find the rotoscoping to look really cool. And that's used again in some of Bakshi's other films. And then there's, some of the humor, like, you see this wizard Avatar. It's set 5,000 years in the future, and he's got the ability to, like, he's got magic because he's a wizard. So they're like in the room, and there's like some kind of something. There's like a piece of furniture or something. And he like wants to sit down. He's like, all right, I'll tell you the story. And he snaps his fingers, and then like a 1950s jukebox appeared. And like some bluesy R&B music starts. I just thought that was kind of funny to juxtapose that with Tolkien-esque castles and stuff. And then there's the sci-fi. I mean, there are, in addition to that, the creatures, the beasts. I mean, some of them look like Dino the dinosaur from the Flintstones. Some of them look terrifying, weird beasts. You don't know what they are. Some of them are more traditional dragons. The ray guns look like space lasers from Star Wars or Star Trek or something. It's kind of like, is this the future? Is this the past? Even the opening font, it's the, for those who are typesetting freaks in our audience, it's the Amelia font, which is a very famous 1970s future font. It's the cover of Alvin Toffler's book, Future Shock. So if you Google that, you'd be like, oh, I know that font. That was the coolest font in 1975. I remember looking at that in Omni magazine and seeing how cool it was. So
Jordan Hoffman, you're grasping at straws here, but
I just think there's a lot of neat stuff in there that, so you despise the film. I'm not going to say it's my favorite thing ever. I'm not planning to watch it again anytime soon, but I think it's an interesting footnote, interesting aspect of the culture, of the underground 70s culture, and also just, movies that came out that aren't that well known, but talk to a lot of filmmakers, and you'd say, hey, did you like Ralph Bakshi's animation? Be like, oh yeah, especially Wizards. Wizards blew my mind, man. I was really influenced by that. I think you'll find a lot of people.
You turn around and you walk away from that person. But in any case, okay, clearly I give it an oi. Clearly.
Yeah, a capital O. Yeah, and I would not give it more than I would actually just kind of give it a meh. I mean, I don't love this movie. I recognize its importance. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in there. I do think some of the slapstick goes on way too long. Even the scene with the rabbis goes on too long. It's like they're being wacky, and at first they're like, "Hey, it's wacky rabbis," and then and I don't know what they're trying to say in that movie because like I said, in every interview back, she says this movie is about Israel and about how the Nazis are coming back and how we have to protect ourselves. And you go, okay, great. And then there are scenes with rabbis, and they're kind of clownish, and you don't know what his take on that is. I suppose he is someone who believes in the secular state of Israel. I don't know. I mean, I would have to.
I mean, they get blown up, so who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to know. By the way, I did interview Ralph Bakshi once
this is called Burying the Lead.
Yeah, no, I kind of forgot until right now. I interviewed him because I don't remember it that well. It was in the mid, let's say 2007, 2008. I interviewed him over the phone. Here's what I remember. That he was living, and he's still alive in his late 80s. So he was living in, I want to say New Mexico. He was no longer making films. He was painting, and I think he was preparing for a gallery show. So I somehow said, hey, he's doing promotion. You want to talk to him? Like, of course I want to talk to him. So I remember getting connected with him on the phone. And even though we were supposed to talk at like 2, and I get him on the phone. He's like, now's not a good time. I'm like, well, we're supposed to talk at 2. He's like, call me back. I'm like, I don't have your number because your publicist put me together with you. He's like, here's my number. He gave me the number. Call me back in 45 minutes. So I said, okay. I called him back in 45 minutes, and he picks up the phone. I just remember going, yeah! Like, that's how he picked up the phone. He shouted at me. And I remember at the time, I was writing for a mainstream publication and just wanted to talk about some of his more, like Lord of the Rings. And, he did in the 80s, he did the rock video for the Rolling Stones Harlem Shuffle. Probably that's the thing he did that most people have seen. They didn't know it was him, but this was a huge rock video in the 1980s because it mixed animation and Mick Jagger dancing around a club. So like I was going to talk to him about that. And at the time, the prime minister or premier or whatever they call the main guy in Iran, Ahmadinejad. What do they have in Iran? They have a prime minister, well, now they don't have anything, but whatever they got these days.
He probably was the president.
The president. Okay, they call him the president. I sometimes get confused. Premier, prime minister, president. I'm very American. To me, if you're not the president, you're nothing. I'm very American that way.
But he was the president.
Yeah, at the time. Oh, there you go. So Ahmadinejad had given some speeches. And, he was a pretty saber-rattling dude. And I remember being on the phone with Ralph Bakshi, and he was screaming at me about Ahmadinejad and how he had to be taken out. And I remember part of me thinking, this is hilarious, because I have crazy 75-year-old Ralph Bakshi screaming at me about the president of Iran. But like, I can't use any of these quotes I have to talk about what you're famous for, not your political rants. And I just couldn't get him back on track. And that's why I was like, all right, goodbye. We're eventually had to hang up. But nice. I remember thinking, well, like that was an experience. Like I got this lunatic, this well-known, underground figure of like, let's get stoned and go to the laser show and listen to this crazy old man rant about Ahmadinejad. Not that I'm pro Ahmadinejad in any way. I'm sure I agree with much of what he was saying, but I was like, okay, can we move on now? So that's my one encounter with the great Ralph Bakshi.
That's pretty cool. All right. That story made it worthwhile watching the film.
There you go.
No, it didn't. It really didn't. In any case.
So I give it a meh. I give it a meh. I give it a straight down the middle meh. I'm not going to stump for it too much. I will say to those who are listening that are intrigued, you can always just check out the first 20 minutes and then clock out just to get the animation style. I think it's a cool style. And you may say, oh, yes, this very particular style, I do see how it has resonated throughout the years, and
I would say, Jordan Hoffman, point them to The Lord of the Rings because it's the same style, but it's actually much, much, much better, effective, as far as I remember.
Amanda, I disagree. I would say choose Wizards instead, because if you're going to go Bakshi, go full Bakshi. Don't get diet Bakshi. Go for the full experience, all the lasciviousness of the fairy woman who's wearing no clothes, and the explosions and the weird rotoscope and the Nazi imagery. Like go for broke, experience it. And if you do like it, then you can go look at his other films. Heavy Traffic also, I think, is quite good. But if not, just then you walk away and say, well, I went for the full dose and I hated it, so I'm done with the guy now. So that's my
So I would say,
suggestion.
Jordan, if it's
Yes.
go full Bakshi or go home, I would
Yes.
say go home. Go home. Just go home.
Fair
In
enough.
any case. Okay.
Yeah.
So as your punishment, I am going
Yes.
to make you watch something extremely commercial and frothy and light. And for next week, we should watch the newest Sandler production.
The Sandler family has conquered Netflix, which is my neck of the woods. Central New Jersey is where they're producing a lot of these new Netflix movies, and the Sandler family has been spotted at various dining locations in the area. One day I'll be there with my wife drinking my soup, looking up, and I'm going to see Adam Sandler, and I'm going to say, hey, I talk about you on the Reel Schmooze. So his family has a new movie. I don't think he's in this one. It's just his daughter. And the daughter, Sunny Sandler, not to be confused with Sadie Sandler. We've talked about some of her films in the past. This movie is called Don't Say Good Luck, and it is a musical teen drama. And it's 110 minutes, Amanda. You picked it. I picked an 80-minute one.
This
you
is
picked
fun
110.
because I'm going to say, can I watch it with the kids?
Probably.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes, you can, because there's no booby fairies hanging
Well,
out.
they're
okay?
listen. Hey, the kids need to learn about booby fairies sometimes, but probably, probably you can watch it. I would imagine this is PG. It doesn't have a rating on there, but it's probably PG, or at least, there'll be a couple of. You want to spice it up a little bit and have one little, a risque moment to like make it seem like you're doing something out of the coloring out of the lines to make it seem like, oh, mom and dad let me watch this movie where they said a few foul words. That makes it all the better. So you gotta weigh that measurement. So yeah, we'll do that one next week. It's called Don't Say Good Luck, and that one's on Netflix. And by the time people can hear this, it will already be available to watch on Netflix. So you can just sit down and watch it in advance of our conversation next week.
That sounds fun.
Yes.
For the whole family, shall we say? Okay.
Yeah.
I will get off my high horse and just say,
not just a horse, a dragon, a flaming dragon with Nazi imagery on it and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Haven't the Jews suffered enough? Really?
I would love to hear from listeners if anyone had seen it. Because I'm sure there were some people like, oh, I kind of remember that one. I rented it on VHS in 1983. Or if anybody is brave enough to actually go and check it out. It is streaming on a lot of the different sites. If you're in North America, I think you can get it for free. Actually, I know you can get it free if you are an Amazon subscriber. It's free on Amazon.
I watched it on Apple for a very
few bucks
amount of shekels. Yeah,
that's right. You made Tim Cook wealthier because you watched Wizards. He's got that wizard money now. I would be very curious to see if people watched it, and even if they disliked it, which is totally fine. Like I say, it does go on a little long. I think it does have some artistry to it. I think if nothing else, it looks pretty damn cool, as they say.
All right, we will let the readers, listeners decide, and I know I'm right. Okay, so Jordan Hoffman, I will see you next week.
Next week with the Sandler family. It'll be great. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze. Please check out another episode next week. Feel free to drop us comments, suggestions, again, recipes. I'm going to just throw it out there. Recipes to podcast@timesofisrael.com. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. Until next week, shalom.